Good morning.
Morning.
Take a minute to say hi to your neighbor, please. Just say hi. It's good to know each other, isn't it? Yes. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Yeah. We're going to start off our session on AppSec security, and I'm sure you guys have attended a lot of sessions on security in these 3 days, isn't it? Yes. Anyone? So, in that case, I won't do a lot of talking. I want us to do a lot of interaction as well, because I know you have a lot of questions on developer security and how you can be able to integrate it within your organizations. So we're going to make it a lot more interactive. That's where how you learn a lot more as well, isn't it? So I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Joylynn Kirui. I'm in Microsoft. I'm a senior cloud security advocate. I'm based out in Kenya. I've been an ethical hacker for 8+ years. So, and I've worked in the security field for around, for more than 8 years as well. So I've worked with developers in terms of finding security vulnerabilities and then pushing back to developers and telling them to fix this. How many of us don't like our security teams? How many of us? None. So I know from previous experience, like the way we used to do it in the legacy way, the developers would develop an MVP, a minimum viable product, and then goes to the security team. And then we find all these security vulnerabilities, and then we would write, let's say, like a 2-pager Excel document, and then give it back to the developers. And they're like, oh my, what the hell is this? Yeah, so in that case, there's a lot of friction. Like we get to see the security team as gatekeepers, and you don't have a very good interaction with them. So today we're going to talk about DevSecOps and how you can be able to integrate security throughout your software development lifecycle, and how you can be able to work with the security team as one instead of working as silos. Okay? So part of the discussion of the session was there are very many tools that you can use to automate application security within your CI/CD. So you're wondering how can you be able to choose which one is right for you, and how are you able to mature your DevSecOps adoption as well? So there's very many questions around this. So we're going to cover all this and how you can be able to automate security throughout your software development lifecycle very easily as well. So let's start with a bit of stats. So we'll find that 52% of companies actually sacrifice cybersecurity for speed. You have 2 weeks to deliver a particular feature, and then when it reaches that Friday when you're supposed to deploy, and then security says that they found this critical vulnerability that this product can go live. What happens in such a case? In most cases, business will say, we are continuing because they have already shared with their shareholders, stakeholders that this is going to go live. 52% of ops team push back on security best practices. You'll find that most of the security vulnerabilities will actually require for you to build a solution upfront, or even for them to use an updated software. So there's usually a lot of pushback from ops team. And 44% of developers are not trained on coding securely. How many of us are trained on secure coding? 3 of us. You can imagine. I don't know if I can ask you how you are actually trained. Do you mind?
We have an online training.
So today we're going to have more interaction, so at least you can learn from other people and as well as the presentation, yeah?
We have an online training.
It's not on.
Online.
Okay.
Secure Code Warrior.
You have a secure code warrior
Online training.
online training. Do you find it like it actually works?
It's okay.
It's okay, but it can be done better, isn't it? And you?
Again, online training.
Online training. Does your security team take time to train your developers?
We don't have a security team.
Okay. Do you have a security team?
We do.
Okay. Okay. Wow, that's an interesting one. Okay. So you'll find that 80 to 90% of the code that we actually incorporate in our software is borrowed code. And you can imagine if you are borrowing code that's not tested well, that has vulnerabilities. You're introducing open doors within your organization for them to even infiltrate your whole network. So we have lateral movements as well as remote code executions that can be done all the way from the application to be able to compromise your whole network. And we have 570 times more developers than security researchers. And in his case, it's, let's say, 40 to 0. So you can imagine if developers are pushing like 1,000 lines of code, then you have like one security personnel. They must miss something. Truth, isn't it? Other sources of security vulnerabilities, apart from the dependencies, are employee error. We are all human. So we have exposed access tokens, code patterns that are unsafe. And we still have that, even if the damage is usually exponentially high when you determine these security vulnerabilities in production than in development. Okay? So what can we do in order to identify these security vulnerabilities early on? We have to always assume breach. You have to have a security first mindset throughout. Assume breach. So Michael Hayden said, fundamentally, if somebody wants to get in, they're getting in. Accept that. So what we tell clients is, number one, you're in the fight. So whether you thought you were not or not. So number two, you are always certainly penetrated. How many of us think you're 100% secure? There is nothing like 100% secure. And if you've never been breached, most certainly you've been breached, but you didn't know you were breached. So funny story, the way I ended up into cybersecurity, I was a software developer, like most of you. And then one time, one of the systems that I built was actually compromised. So there was a lot of blame going around. And that's when I was like, okay, so there's much more that I can be able to do within my software development journey. I went and accessed all those online resources and learned how to build more secure code. And that's how I got into this journey, like how to train developers on secure coding, because it's something that we don't talk a lot about and something we should be doing on a daily. So first of all, always assume breach. By assuming breach, we have two areas where we try to prevent breach and assuming breach. So when you're trying to prevent breach, you have to have a threat model. So a threat model is whereby you are trying to emulate what a hacker would be able to do to compromise your system. You have all these vectors. You have maybe an API endpoint that's public facing. That's an avenue that can be used to compromise your systems. You have, let's say, an HTTP endpoint as well. You have, you're using a database. You probably have it deployed publicly. That's also a flaw. So you always have to do threat modeling, see what vector can be used within your organization, within your network to compromise your organization. You have to do code review. All organizations should have like at least a list of things that all developers should follow in terms of secure coding standards, code review, pair programming, peer reviews as well, security testing, and security development lifecycle. But always assume breach. You have to identify the attack surfaces that can be used. By that, you have to know, okay, so I have this whole architecture. What vector can be used to compromise this whole system? You have to have a strategy to protect your customer data. So when you're talking about security, we have the CIA triad. we have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So everything we do around security lands on those three pillars. So we have to make sure that whatever we are integrating, whatever input we're getting from the user is secure. How it's being transmitted to the server, to the databases is secure. How it's stored in the database is secure. Everything is secure. So you might be wondering, so is security really my work as a developer? Isn't it the work for the security team? Are we putting too much burden on the developer if we are adding a lot more security checks on them? We'll answer that. So I want someone to show me. Let's do a simple exercise. What's wrong with this code?
No password?
Mm-hmm. Good. So this one accepts empty passwords, isn't it? So you'll find that the people are still doing this. This is where we start talking about DevSecOps, the importance of shifting security left. So shifting security left within your CI/CD pipeline in order to embed security, because we find that we have 80% reduction in security incidents when we extend security to the development lifecycle. It's 60 times cheaper to fix security vulnerabilities from development all through before production. And as we said earlier, 62% of enterprises do not integrate security into the development phase. So within the whole DevOps, we have all these tools. I'm sure most of these tools are familiar to you, isn't it? How many of us have used, let's say, Dropbox, Jenkins, there's Splunk here, we have Datadog. How many of us have used any of this? Do you guys find it so confusing? Like you have so many tools to doing so many things. Like it just gets like everything is just in one place. Anyone? So you can also imagine now we have bringing security into this whole picture. So we have the pre-commit in the whole secure development, the whole software development lifecycle. We have the pre-commit, and then you go to the commit, then deploy, then operate. So in the pre-commit, we have to integrate security softwares to check for all those IDE security plugins. And then in the commit, you have to check all these. So we'll go through all of that as well. So you can imagine we have tools for everything. So how much information overload do we have? Can we make it simpler? So during the pre-commit, we want to make sure that you have threat vectors identified and you're able to fix those security vulnerabilities. IDE security plugin is where you come in and make sure that you have, let me show you. So within your IDE, you should be able to identify, let me increase this. Within your IDE, on a day-to-day, you should be able to integrate extensions that should be able to help you within your daily day-to-day code review. So when you go to extensions within your IDE and you search for, let's say, security, you'll find all these security extensions that can be used. If you've attended some of the sessions by Sneak, you can be able to use it. And it finds security vulnerabilities as you go. So whenever you're coding, it's always crawling to find any security vulnerabilities. You have very many extensions that you can be able to use. So first of all, for developers, you should be able to use this on the onset to identify security vulnerabilities. And then what else after that? You have to do threat modeling. Every 2 weeks, whenever you are integrating a new feature, make sure you do some threat modeling to identify which new vectors are being introduced. You have to use pre-commit hooks. So before you actually commit your application or you're pushing anything, if you have security secrets incorporated, it prevents you from pushing to your repo. You have to also have peer review. Nowadays we have Copilot as well, which can be able to help you build as a peer programmer as well. And then in the commit, we're looking at static application security testing, SAST. So SAST looks at security vulnerability within the code that you've actually built, not borrowed code. And then we do look at security unit tests and dependency management, what we call software composition analysis. So this is what we are looking at, the 80 to 90% of borrowed code, or open source vulnerabilities, and third-party dependencies. We also look at credential scanning. And then in the deploy, this is where we look at whatever infrastructure that you're spinning up. You have to make sure that it's secure by default. And you have to look at dynamic security scanning as well. So whenever your application is already deployed, let's say in a staging environment, we have scanning tools that can be able to go in and crawl and try and fuzz into all your inputs to see the reaction of your application. And then you also have cloud configuration checks just to make sure that your infrastructure is pinned up, be it, like say, Azure, AWS, is already secure. And then you have to do, lastly, security acceptance just to make sure that all these have passed before you go in and operate and monitor. You always have to have continuous monitoring, threat intelligence, and blameless postmortems just to make sure that everything is finished up securely. The reason why we have continuous monitoring is because we have zero-day vulnerabilities. So every day we have hundreds of new security vulnerabilities that are targeting your applications. So you have to go in and make sure that everything is secure. So let's go in and just check practically how you can be able to do it. So the first thing as a developer, should be able to you should be able to identify security vulnerabilities on the onset. So you can be able to do this using GitHub Advanced Security. So GitHub Advanced Security does code scanning, secret scanning, and as well as dependency management. This is free as well for public repos. So if you have your repo maybe open right now, you can go to this security tab and make sure that you enable the security policy, you enable code scanning, and dependabot alerts as well. And if you go to settings, and you go to code security and analysis, you should be able to enable dependabots and code scanning as well. So code scanning, it will use a tool called CodeQL analysis, and then it will scan through and find security vulnerabilities in your code base. But you can be able to go in and explore the various tools that are available in the marketplace as well, just the same way we did in Visual Studio Code. We have all these security tools that you can be able to incorporate as well. You can see Sneak, API Scan, Dev Scheme as well, which can be able to go in and do your security reviews with. We also have MobSF for those mobile developers that you have. You can be able to go in and do mobile app review using this open source tool. So today we're going to cover, we have the Microsoft Defender for DevOps, so which incorporates all these security tools into one in order for you to be able to integrate it into your software development lifecycle. So the reason why I was pointing out all those developer tools that you have, that bring all those noise, bring all those false positives. So you have to integrate all of them, and then they bring all that noise within a centralized location. So what happens if you have one solution that brings all of those tools into one? So in this case, we'll be using Bean Scheme. We'll be using GitHub Advanced Security for code review. We'll be using Bean Scheme for checking your binaries for security vulnerabilities. We'll be using ESLint for your JavaScript. And then template analyzer if you have ARM templates. Even APIs can be checked using the template analyzer. And then Terrascan is used for infrastructure as code checks. And then we have Trivi, which checks your containers and your file systems and Git repositories for security vulnerabilities. This is quite useful. Actually, all of these are open source tools. You should be able to go in and play around with them and see if, what security vulnerabilities they give. So the way you do it on GitHub is you go into your workflow and you create a new workflow specifically for Defender for DevOps. This can also be found within the workflow. I'll also share the link to my repo, so at least can go in and do it step by yourselves. Once you have this deployed, you can see it has the run Microsoft Security DevOps analysis. So it will crawl through your whole application and software and checks for all those security vulnerabilities. And the good thing is this, is that for developers, we also have PR annotation. So before you push any changes and you find the security vulnerabilities to the main branch, you can be able, it will give you all those security vulnerabilities and you've patched them. And then if all the checks finish and it's successful, it's now merged to the main branch. It's very simple, right? Right? Okay. So in Azure DevOps as well, it's very simple. We have the marketplace. So the same case with Visual Studio Code in GitHub as well. So if you scan for security, you'll find all these extensions as well, which you can be able to use. In our case, for the Microsoft Defender for DevOps, you'll be able to use the Microsoft Security DevOps. And you make sure that you just say get it for free. So I already have it installed, so I can go to my organization. And then once you're in your organization, you go to, you can create a new pipeline. You select your repo. You can use a starter pipeline. And then you just use the show assistant. So once you have the extension installed, you just search for it. And then you click on it, and then you can just add it as is. So it will just add this task, which will check all those security features within your infrastructure and give you the security vulnerabilities. And then you say save and run. So once you say save and run, it will take a few minutes, and then you're able to go into your pipelines and see the security vulnerabilities here. When you go to scans, remember I mentioned all those tools. So it will check against software development, secure software development lifecycle, and then CredScan. It uses CredScan for security vulnerabilities, for credentials that are hard-coded or exposed within your code. It uses Terrascan for your infrastructure as code. In this case, it gives you the recommendations for your Docker file. And then it also has the template analyzer to check for your ARM templates and Trivy for your container security. So it gives you an overall view of what you need to be able to fix. And then for the security managers as well, you can be able to go to your Azure portal, and within Microsoft Defender for Cloud, you can add the environment settings. So if your repository is sitting within GitHub, let's say we have AWS, GCP, GitHub, and Azure DevOps. You can have that visibility of all your code bases within different environments and different pipelines. So you can be able to add these different environments there. And then we also have workbooks, which will give you an overall view of your security posture from secrets exposed within all your repos, within all your code bases, within your open source vulnerabilities, and as well as infrastructure as code, and give you a security posture of everything within your environment and the threats that are involved there as well. In my opinion, it's very simple. So I think we'll just go back to what we were talking about. So apart from having these tools embedded, remember DevSecOps is not about tooling. It's all about a shift of your mentality in terms of security. You all have to know that security is everyone's responsibility. You have a key stake in this journey because developers are actually the first line of defense. You usually know whenever you're deploying something that's insecure, true or false? True or false? Yes, and then you go with it as well. So it's all a journey. So whenever it's time for you to choose an application or a tool within your DevSecOps, you have to look at if that tool fits within a particular timeline. By that I mean, if it takes more than 10 minutes for it to scan your code within your CI/CD, that's too long. You have to choose, you have to have always do POCs for all these applications that you are, all these software that you are incorporating within your environment, and make sure it meets your need. Make sure that it takes, with less than 10 minutes, and it has very few false positives and false negatives. What do you mean by false positives? So false positives are, it gives you issues that are actually not issues, and also have false negatives. So false negatives, in my opinion, are a lot worse because you'll think that you have like 10 security vulnerabilities, but in reality you have 30 security vulnerabilities. Okay? Always make sure that at least whatever tools are being deployed in your organization is actually being used. I've seen scenarios whereby you have all those tools incorporated, but developers are not using it. So we have to make sure that it's a developer-first setting whereby we identify security vulnerabilities all the way from the IDE and all the way until continuous monitoring. Okay? Remember, always assume breach. For us, we have to be lucky all the time. A hacker has to be lucky only one time for them to compromise the system. So this is actually a cyber warfare. We are being attacked every single day, and we all have a stake in making this world secure, one code at a time. Okay. So this time I want us to just brainstorm, like maybe questions that you have in terms of developer security. So at least you can all learn from all of us experiences. And maybe you have a developer security question. I'm happy to answer, so at least all of us learn. Yes.
Earlier you mentioned the concept.
Sorry. Earlier you said something about proof of concepts.
Yes.
Did you mean creating proof of concepts of any features or of any issues that might be identified?
So by proof of concept, if you want to integrate like a security tool, you always have to know, what do I want from this security tool? Does it meet the requirements? So that's your proof of concept.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. So I have a question that may be a bit precise, but I was wondering if you have how you feel about the tool Veracode, because I know that the scans are extremely long to run, and you're saying that you recommend like 10 minutes at most. So I don't know how you feel about this tool.
So it all comes down to your maturity model. So in DevSecOps, yes, you can take the tool as is. So that's what you call DevSecOps maturity level 1. So in such a case, the scans take a lot longer, and you find also a lot of false positives. So that's why you have to go in and tweak those tools, be it Veracode, be it Sneak, to make them work for your particular environment. So in such a case, once you have customized it, it should take a lot lesser. Yeah, because you've identified maybe your organization uses maybe Java, Python only. You only scan using those languages only.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. When you mentioned something about false negative,
Yes.
how can we figure out we have a false negative? So should we run more than one plugin, or should more security tool, or how can I know that it's false negative?
That's an interesting question. So that's why we don't always just do automated security checks. That's why also the security team needs to come in and also do manual security checks. Okay, so during the manual review, that's when you'll be able to identify a lot more security vulnerabilities. So the way we do, this is the same way hackers do, we do automated checks to find security vulnerabilities. So by security vulnerabilities, we mean like CVEs. CVEs are known vulnerabilities, but you also have unknown vulnerabilities as well. So with the CVEs, we later go on and try to exploit those vulnerabilities. So once we exploit that vulnerabilities, we'll see that, yes, it's actually an exploitable vulnerability. So we have to, first step is usually reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is whereby we try and see, okay, so what ports are open? What has the developer laid out there for the world to see? I'll do review of the code to try and understand, okay, so what are the thought processes of the developer? Is there a weak link within that particular code? Can I be able to compromise it? And then after that, after doing some enumeration, we've done some reconnaissance. We've identified that we have all these endpoints that are publicly accessible. And then now you go in to do enumeration. So can you be able to attack all those endpoints, all those databases from even publicly? And then now you go in and exploit them. So yeah, it's a whole process to do the manual penetration testing, but it gets a lot more security vulnerabilities.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you recommend one tool that you can run on your laptop, desktop to sort of to check for security before you get anywhere near pushing your code?
We have many. So you're saying within your
Gotta pick one.
IDE? Within your IDE?
Yeah, a plugin.
Yeah, plugin. Okay, so I personally, okay, this is a very, like, it's a personal solution, because remember, whatever plugin you use has to be in line also with the programming language that you use. Not all of them scan all programming languages, okay? So if you're using Java, like, you can be able to even use the like of Sneaks, even contrast, security, like, it depends with you. But also for GitHub Advanced Security, you have the GitHub pull request extension, which also attaches to the GitHub Advanced Security. So whenever you're coding, at least it finds you the security vulnerabilities, and you can be able to close them before pushing it to your public repo. Okay, but that one take time to identify which extension works for you, or you can play around with them. So you can find that one found like 20 security vulnerabilities, and then the other one found like 15 security vulnerabilities. So, and then you'll find that the one that found 20 security vulnerabilities actually had a lot of informative security vulnerabilities, which you would do without or without. So it's all about finding a balance. Yeah. So I hope we will all have a hand in terms of finding or integrating the security extensions and also within your CI/CD to find to automate security findings as early on as possible. Okay. Any other question? We're all good. How many of us are now secure developers? Yeah. So I'm happy to have any questions. If you want to know a lot more about the security features that are available, how you can be able to incorporate them. But let me share with you some resources which you can use. So you can access aka.ms /DevSecOps solution to find all the resources that you can be able to incorporate within your pipeline. And then okay. And then some of other resources that you can be able to use. You can take a photo of that as well. And that's it. You can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer anything developer security, and also I'll be here for a couple more minutes. Thank you. You've been awesome, and have a great rest of your conference.